superhero mouse sniffing flower petals sparked accusations of cocaine promotion. A gentle gargoyle's curiosity left a beloved character bleeding on screen, and one turtle's signature weapon forced animators to redraw over 50 episodes. These moments didn't just shock audiences, they ended careers, killed shows, and changed children's television forever. Pole Position: The Demolition Derby Disaster. DIC Entertainment tried to capitalize on Namco's popular racing arcade game by creating a cartoon about the Darrett siblings. Dan, Tess, and young Daisy worked as stunt drivers and crime fighters with their AI-equipped vehicles, Wheels and Rhodey. Uncle Zachary guided their missions while the show attempted to blend Knight Rider's high-octane thrills with family adventure. It lasted exactly 13 episodes. Peak 80s automotive obsession defined this cultural moment. Shows like Knight Rider and movies like Cannonball Run had audiences craving vehicular action. Pole Position took things further than broadcasters anticipated. Racing sequences regularly featured demolition derby scenarios where cars exploded and flipped directly into spectator areas. Debris scattered across crowds. The implication of civilian injuries was impossible to ignore. Animation depicted graphic consequences of vehicular mayhem that had European censors immediately reaching for the banhammer. Not sanitized crashes with everyone walking away unscathed. Genuine ambition drove the show's creative team. AI cars had personality. Sibling dynamics offered family appeal. Animation quality, for its time, delivered impressive action sequences, but negatives far outweighed any creative merit. European broadcasts pulled the show for promoting unsafe driving. Parents in multiple countries protested the reckless endangerment themes. The message being sent to children seemed to glorify dangerous automotive behavior at a time when road safety dominated public concern. Pole Position burned bright and fast, killed by its own excess. The combination of parental outcry and international bans proved fatal, and declining ratings meant networks had no incentive to fight for it. Sports programming regularly preempted what remained of its run. Reruns appeared sporadically at best. This show became a cautionary tale about how quickly a cartoon could flame out when its core appeal crossed the line into controversy. M.A.S.K. The Secret of the Andes. Kenner Toys created M.A.S.K, Mobile Armored Strike Command, as their answer to the success of G.I. Joe and Transformers. Matt Tracker led a team of agents who wore specialized masks with unique powers and drove vehicles that could transform into different modes. They battled the terrorist organization V.E.No.M, led by Miles Mayhem, across 75 episodes of gadget-heavy espionage action. Solid premise, reasonable toy sales, but one episode in particular accelerated the show's demise. The 80s spy craze was in full swing when M.A.S.K hit the airwaves. James Bond films, shows like MacGyver, and the gadget obsession of the era made this property seem like a sure thing. Transforming vehicles appealed to the Transformers crowd, while human agents satisfied those who preferred G.I. Joe's military aesthetic. It should have been a winning formula. The Secret of the Andes featured a mountain pursuit sequence that went catastrophically wrong from a broadcast standards perspective. V.E.No.M vehicles weren't just chasing heroes through scenic Andean landscapes, they plowed directly into crowds of civilians. Fiery crashes occurred in populated areas. Unmistakable implications of mass casualties filled the screen. This wasn't cartoon violence where everyone gets up and dusts themselves off. Animation conveyed genuine destruction with human consequences, innovative vehicle designs, a memorable theme song, and a premise combining the best elements of competitors gave M.A.S.K genuine strengths. Action sequences, when not crossing lines, delivered the excitement kids craved. But this particular episode proved fatal. Latin American broadcasters pulled it immediately for glorifying reckless violence. The controversy couldn't have come at a worse time. Toy sales were already slumping. Networks were looking for any reason to walk away, and this episode gave them exactly that. Bad timing and worse judgment killed M.A.S.K. One episode didn't destroy it alone, but The Secret of the Andes accelerated an already troubled production's cancellation. Vehicular carnage crossed a line that international broadcasters refused to ignore, and without global syndication revenue, the show couldn't justify its production costs. Transformers: Child's Play. Sunbow Productions and Marvel collaborated on what became one of the most successful cartoon franchises of the 1980s. Optimus Prime's heroic Autobots waged war against Megatron's evil Decepticons across 98 episodes, spawning an animated film in 1986 that traumatized an entire generation with the death of beloved characters. Hasbro made billions in toy sales and created a franchise that continues to dominate today. But even Transformers wasn't immune to controversy. Cultural significance of Transformers cannot be overstated. This wasn't just a cartoon selling toys. A phenomenon redefined what animated series could achieve in terms of storytelling complexity and emotional investment. Kids formed genuine attachments to these robotic characters. Stakes felt real. Battles had consequences. This made the show's occasional missteps all the more jarring. Child's Play featured a prison riot sequence that crossed multiple lines simultaneously. Autobots and Decepticons engaged in conflict that resulted in human inmates being gassed. Animation showed choking, panic, and suffering. These weren't enemy combatants or villains receiving comeuppance. Human beings beings, prisoners, appeared in genuine distress from suffocation. European censors immediately flagged the suffocation visuals. American reruns cut the sequence entirely for depicting cruelty to humans. Groundbreaking animation, memorable characters with distinct personalities, and storylines that respected young viewers' intelligence made Transformers special. The show proved cartoons could tell complex narratives, but this particular episode revealed the dangers of Toei Animation's sometimes rushed production. Animation errors plagued the episode beyond its content issues, including infamous tidal wave mistakes that added to its notoriety among fans. Child's Play represents a black mark on an otherwise legendary series. Growing complaints about violence in children's programming eventually helped end the show after 3 seasons. Despite the 1986 movie's box office success, Transformers survived this controversy better than most entries on this list, but damage to its broadcast reputation was real and lasting. Inspector Gadget, Gadget at the Circus. DIC Entertainment created one of the most enduring characters of 80s animation with Inspector Gadget. Don Adams of Get Smart fame voiced the cyborg detective who bumbled through cases while his brilliant niece Penny and loyal dog Brain did the actual work of foiling Dr. Claw's mad organization. The French-Canadian co-production delivered 86 episodes of slapstick adventure, spawning sequels, films, and merchandise that kept the brand alive for decades. Early episodes contained darkness that wouldn't survive broadcast scrutiny. A boom in gadget-focused entertainment defined the early 80s. James Bond's Q-branch gadgets combined with emerging personal technology made audiences hungry for inventive devices. Inspector Gadget delivered this in spades, with the titular inspector's body containing a seemingly endless array of extending arms, helicopter rotors, and specialized tools. Comedic potential was limitless, but comedy and danger walked an uncomfortable line. Gadget at the Circus pushed that line until it snapped. Penny faced genuine mortal peril, nearly drowning in a sabotaged water tank during a high-wire circus act. This wasn't the usual cartoon peril where danger feels abstract. The sequence conveyed real terror. Making matters worse, mad agents detonated actual explosives in crowds, scattering debris and clearly implying civilian casualties. This wasn't slapstick. Action movie violence had been transplanted into a children's cartoon. An innovative premise, memorable theme music, and the comedic genius of having an incompetent hero succeed, despite himself, gave Inspector Gadget lasting appeal. The relationship between Gadget, Penny, and Brain created genuine warmth, but severe negatives plagued this episode. Complaints about child endangerment flooded network phone lines. Pyrotechnics echoed real circus tragedies fresh in public memory. US syndication pulled the episode post-1983. Nickelodeon reruns featured heavy cuts. Gadget at the Circus helped define what children's animation couldn't do. Scrutiny it brought hastened the show's 1986 conclusion amid declining toy sales. Networks became wary of the property's darker tendencies. Full versions only resurfaced decades later on streaming platforms, but the episode's removal shaped broadcast standards for years. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, Rainbow Warrior. Filmation's sword and sorcery juggernaut dominated 80s animation. Prince Adam transformed into He-Man, defender of Eternia against the evil Skeletor, in one of the most recognizable images of the decade. Over 130 episodes combined biblical moral lessons with action figure warfare, creating a template that countless imitators would follow. Parents appreciated positive messages, while boys got the action they craved. One episode took the show's fantasy elements into territory censors couldn't accept. Escalating concern about drug use among young people defined the 1980s. Nancy Reagan's Just Say No campaign turned substance abuse into a national obsession. Parents scrutinized every piece of media their children consumed for drug references or glorification. Anything remotely resembling altered states of consciousness became suspect in this environment. He-Man walked directly into this minefield. Rainbow Warrior featured Skeletor deploying a hallucinogenic mist against He-Man and his allies. Resulting visions were nightmarish, showing monsters devouring the heroes in psychedelic sequences that unmistakably mimicked descriptions of LSD experiences. Animation didn't shy away from the terror and disorientation the characters experienced. Censors already primed to spot drug references found this impossible to ignore. Earnest moral messaging, willingness to address real issues in age-appropriate ways, and animation that pushed Filmation's capabilities gave He-Man genuine merit. The show genuinely tried to make boys better people while entertaining them, but catastrophic negatives plagued this episode's international distribution. The UK banned it outright for promoting drug effects. Multiple European countries followed suit. Syndication packages excised the episode, shortening the show's run abroad significantly. Rainbow Warrior represented a well-intentioned episode destroyed by terrible timing. Had it aired in a different era, fantasy framing might have protected it, but Reagan-era drug panic made anything depicting altered consciousness as even temporarily appealing absolutely toxic. Controversy contributed to He-Man's 1985 conclusion, though the franchise lived on through She-Ra and eventual revivals. Thundercats, the Garden of Delights. Rankin Bass Productions, better known for holiday specials like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, created something entirely different with Thundercats. Lion-O and his fellow feline refugees fled the destruction of their homeworld Thundera to build new lives on Third Earth while battling the ancient evil of Mum-Ra. 130 episodes of mythic adventure built a cult following that persists today. Darker tone and complex lore set it apart from competitors. That darkness occasionally crossed into territory that made censors very uncomfortable. An increasingly crowded mid-80s cartoon landscape saw action properties competing for the same audience. Thundercats distinguished itself through more mature storytelling, genuine stakes, and mythology that rewarded dedicated viewers. The show trusted its audience to handle complex themes. Sometimes that trust proved misplaced in the eyes of broadcast standards departments. The Garden of Delights saw mutants lure Lion-O into a hypnotic garden filled with seductive imagery. Scantily clad temptresses beckoned the young hero. Psychedelic fruits promised pleasure and escape. Visual language unmistakably implied both sexual enticement and drug-induced euphoria. For a show ostensibly aimed at children, this was remarkably provocative content. Garden sequences played like something from adult fantasy, transplanted awkwardly into Saturday morning programming. Sophisticated world building, memorable character designs, and willingness to explore themes other shows avoided gave Thundercats distinction. Lion-O's journey from child in an adult body to true leader resonated emotionally, but severe and lasting negatives followed this episode. The UK banned it for implied sexual content and psychedelics. Controversy prompted Rankin Bass to self-censor future episodes, diluting the show's distinctive edge. Later seasons felt safer, blander, less willing to take risks. The Garden of Delights represented ambition that outpaced what broadcast television could accept. The episode wanted to explore temptation and moral testing in genuinely challenging ways. Execution crossed lines that 80s censors couldn't ignore. Resulting self-censorship weakened the show creatively, contributing to its 1989 conclusion. G.I. Joe, a real American hero, various episodes. Hasbro's military juggernaut, animated by Sunbow Productions and Marvel, represented perhaps the most ambitious cartoon toy synergy of the 1980s. Elite G.I. Joe team members, featuring iconic characters like Duke, Snake Eyes, and Scarlet, battled the terrorist organization Cobra across 95 episodes of high-tech warfare. Educational PSAs balanced genuine action and became cultural touchstones. Knowing is half the battle entered the national vocabulary. Behind the patriotic veneer lurked content that international censors found deeply troubling. A specific cultural moment shaped G.I. Joe's existence. Cold War tensions remained high. Military heroism was being rehabilitated after Vietnam-era skepticism. The show positioned the American military might as an unambiguous force for good against clearly evil terrorists. Reagan-era patriotism resonated with this message, but depictions of warfare included elements that couldn't translate globally. Multiple episodes featured scenes that drew censorship across international markets. Cobra Commander and Destro executed prisoners of war on screen. Laser blasts to the head left no ambiguity about lethal intent. Episodes like The Traitor implied electrocution torture. Cobra's Candidate featured gassing sequences. The UK's British Board of Film Classification banned nunchaku depictions, affecting related 80s media beyond just this show. American censors cut death implications for syndication. European versions removed prisoner killings entirely. Memorable characters, innovative vehicle designs, and genuine attempts at moral education through PSAs gave G.I. Joe's real strengths. The show created lifelong fans who appreciated its balance of action and values, but negatives accumulated across multiple episodes created an unsustainable situation. Parents complained about promoting militarism to children. International edits became so extensive that different countries watched essentially different shows. Cumulative controversy led to the series' abrupt end after season 2, despite massive toy sales. G.I. Joe tried to have it both ways. The show wanted realistic military action while maintaining a Saturday morning time slot. That contradiction proved impossible to sustain. A 1987 movie followed the series, but animated adventures of the Joe team never fully recovered. The franchise survived through toys and eventual revivals, but the original series remains a cautionary tale about violence in children's programming. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles nunchaku fight scenes. Mirage Comics' surprisingly dark independent comic became a multimedia empire through this adaptation. Leonardo, Raphael, Donatello, and Michelangelo, 4 mutant turtle brothers trained in ninjutsu by their rat sensei Splinter, battled Shredder and the Foot Clan across hundreds of episodes. Pizza became permanently associated with the characters. Merchandise revenue was staggering. Cultural impact was undeniable. One character's signature weapon created problems that lasted nearly a decade. Michelangelo was the party dude, the comic relief, the fun-loving turtle who balanced his his brother's more serious personalities. His weapon of choice was the nunchaku, iconic paired sticks connected by chains that Bruce Lee had made famous in films like Enter the Dragon. That association was precisely the problem. In the UK, the British Board of Film Classification, under Chief James Furman, had banned nunchaku depictions since the 1970s. Fear was straightforward. Children would attempt to imitate what they saw on screen, and nunchaku could cause serious injury in untrained hands. This wasn't a single episode controversy. Systematic censorship affected the entire series. Every fight scene featuring Michelangelo's nunchaku required attention. Some episodes obscured the weapon through editing. Others were redrawn entirely, giving Mikey a grappling hook called the Turtle Line instead. Over 50 episodes required modification. UK airing was delayed until 1990. Some markets went further, retitling the show Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles because ninja itself was considered too violent a term. Revolutionary character design, genuinely funny writing, and appeal that crossed demographic boundaries made Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles special. The show proved animation could launch billion-dollar franchises, but the nunchaku controversy shaped international perception of the property for years. Self-censorship rippled beyond the UK, softening the show's edge globally. What American audiences watched and what British audiences watched were substantially different experiences. A single element creating cascading problems across an entire production defined this controversy. The nunchaku ban didn't kill the show. Franchise strength prevented that, but it fundamentally altered what the show could be in international markets. The ban only lifted in the 2000s, finally allowing original episodes to appear on DVD. Michelangelo got his nunchaku back, but the decade of censorship left lasting marks on the franchise. The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse, The Littlest Tramp. Ralph Bakshi was an unusual choice to revive a 1940s cartoon superhero. Known for adult animation like Fritz the Cat and the rotoscoped fantasy epic Fire and Ice, Bakshi brought auteur sensibilities to a children's property. The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse blended classic heroism with postmodern satire, featuring the tiny superhero protecting Pearl Pureheart from villains while commenting on animation conventions themselves. Critics praised innovative animation and genuine artistry. It ran one season on CBS, then a single scene lasting 3.5 seconds destroyed everything. Cultural context could not have been worse. This was 1987. The crack cocaine epidemic was devastating American cities. Nancy Reagan's Just Say No campaign had reached fever pitch. Any media perceived as promoting drug use faced immediate destruction. Religious groups actively monitored children's programming for satanic messages, drug references, and sexual content. The American Family Association, led by Reverend Donald Wildman, positioned itself as guardian of American families against corrupting media influences. They were looking for targets. Mighty Mouse gave them one. The Littlest Tramp featured Mighty Mouse helping an orphan named Polly Pine Blossom. When a bully crushes Polly's flower, Mighty Mouse takes the powdered petals from his cape and sniffs them to regain his strength. Animation showed him inhaling white powder and becoming energized. In any other context, this might have passed unnoticed. In 1987 America, it looked exactly like cocaine use. The American Family Association launched a national campaign. Reverend Wildman declared the scene depicted drug use and labeled Bakshi a pornographer. Petitions circulated. Media coverage exploded. CBS found itself defending a cartoon mouse against accusations of promoting cocaine to children. Bakshi's defense, that the scene symbolized Mighty Mouse remembering fond memories associated with Polly's flower, convinced no one. Imagery was too powerful, too easily interpreted in the worst possible way. Genuinely innovative animation and artistic merit that most 80s cartoons couldn't claim gave the New Adventures of Mighty Mouse real substance. Bakshi pushed the medium's boundaries in ways that influenced future animators, but fatal negatives followed this single controversy. CBS edited the 3.5-second scene for reruns. Damage was done. Ratings collapsed as controversy made the show toxic. After 26 episodes, CBS pulled the plug. The uncut version didn't surface until DVD releases in 2010, over 2 decades later. The Littlest Tramp controversy represented the perfect storm of bad timing, unfortunate imagery, and organized opposition. 3.5 seconds killed a show that deserved better. Bakshi's artistic ambitions collided with Reagan-era moral panic in a collision that only had one possible outcome. The New Adventures of Mighty Mouse became a cautionary tale about how quickly a single scene could destroy years of creative work. Gargoyles, Deadly Force. Technically, Gargoyles aired in 1994, placing it outside the strict boundaries of the 1980s, but the show represented the culmination of everything 80s. Animation had built toward employing darker storytelling approaches that 80s shows had pioneered while pushing those boundaries further than anyone had dared. Greg Weisman created this Disney production about a clan of medieval Scottish gargoyles awakened in modern New York City. Shakespearean drama, urban fantasy, and genuine emotional complexity blended in ways that children's animation had never achieved. One episode featured a scene so shocking shocking, so graphically violent that Disney itself pulled the episode from broadcast. Gargoyles trusted its young audience with complex themes. Betrayal, loss, mortality, and moral ambiguity filled the storylines. Characters died and stayed dead. Villains had comprehensible motivations. The Gargoyles themselves, led by the noble Goliath, formed a genuine found family with human detective Elisa Maza. Serialized storytelling before serialization became common in children's animation rewarded dedicated viewers with ongoing storylines and character development. This ambition made occasional missteps all the more impactful. Deadly Force centered on Broadway, the gentle giant of the Gargoyle clan. Broadway loved detective novels and Western films. Gunslinging heroes fascinated him with their romance and bravado. When he discovered Elisa Maza's service pistol during a raid on crime boss Tony Draken's weapons warehouse, his curiosity led to tragedy. Broadway accidentally discharged the weapon. The bullet hit Elisa in the chest. Then the show did something unprecedented for children's animation. It showed the consequences. Elisa collapsed in a pool of blood. She convulsed in agony. Animation didn't cut away. It didn't sanitize. A beloved character writhing on the ground, bleeding, dying, filled the screen. Broadway fled in horror and guilt. Other gargoyles, not knowing who shot their friend, hunted Draken for revenge. The episode was meant as an anti-firearm PSA, showing children that guns weren't toys, that accidents happened, that consequences were real and terrible. Intention was educational. The execution was traumatizing. Genuine narrative courage defined Deadly Force at its best. The episode took a real issue, gun violence, and addressed it with unflinching honesty. Broadway's guilt and redemption arc had emotional power. The show refused to treat its young audience as incapable of handling difficult themes. Children's animation was doing something genuinely important here, but negatives were impossible for Disney to ignore. Blood, convulsing, graphic depiction of gunshot injury. This wasn't Saturday morning cartoon violence where characters bounce back. This was real. This was permanent. This was horrifying. Disney initially banned the episode from Toon Disney reruns entirely. ABC broadcasts featured edited versions with blood removed and injury toned down. Controversy amplified existing concerns about the show's dark tone. Gargoyles had always pushed boundaries with its complexity and occasional violence. Deadly Force proved those boundaries could be pushed too far. Scrutiny contributed to the show's 1996 cancellation after 3 seasons, despite a passionate fan base that continues advocating for the property today. Deadly Force represented both the peak and the downfall of dark children's animation. Here was a show brave enough to tackle gun violence honestly, treating children as capable of understanding real consequences. Here was a broadcast environment that couldn't handle that honesty. The uncut version of the episode finally surfaced on Disney Plus in 2019, 25 years after it originally aired. Fans could finally see what Disney had deemed too intense for children. What they found was a genuinely powerful piece of television, one that trusted its audience more than the network trusted the show. These scenes and episodes represent more than just controversial moments in animation history. They mark the boundaries of what children's entertainment could attempt in an era of increasing scrutiny and organized opposition. The 1980s gave us some of the most beloved cartoons ever created, but it also gave us parent groups with fax machines, religious organizations monitoring for corruption, and international censorship boards applying their own standards to American productions. Creators pushed boundaries because that's what creators do. Networks pushed back because advertisers demanded safe programming. In between, episodes got banned, scenes got cut, and some shows died entirely. Irony fills these stories because many controversial moments had educational intentions. Deadly Force wanted to teach children about gun safety. The Littlest Tramp contained no actual drug references. Nunchaku censorship prevented children from seeing a weapon they could easily encounter in martial arts classes. Well-meaning people made decisions that, in retrospect, seem excessive, but they made those decisions in a specific cultural moment when children's media was under unprecedented scrutiny. Thunar the Barbarian. Picture this, you're a kid again, sitting cross-legged in front of a bulky TV, watching the world crumble under a crimson sky. The year 1994, from out of space comes a runaway planet. The narrator's voice still echoes in your head. A post-apocalyptic Earth, mutants, sorcery, swords that blaze with lightning. This was Thunar the Barbarian. It was raw, primitive, and visually stunning for its time. You could almost feel the heat of the desert sun radiating off the cracked landscapes. Every swing of Thundar's sunsword left a flash on the screen so bright it felt dangerous. But that's the thing. Danger was part of the thrill. Kids back then weren't protected by filters, they were fueled by imagination. The show was banned in several regions because parents complained it was too violent, too dark, and too apocalyptic. The idea of a destroyed Earth, once ruled by wizards and mutants, was apparently too intense for Saturday morning. Yet for many kids, it was the first time we imagined a world that didn't need saving, it needed surviving. Now think about what kids watch today. Bright colors, soft voices, carefully measured morals. Nothing wrong with that. But back then, danger was a teacher. So tell me, would you rather be safe or spellbound? Robotech. If you remember Robotech, you remember the sound of jet engines screaming, through outer space and the flash of transforming mechas slicing through alien fleets. But what most people forget is that this wasn't just a cartoon. It was a war drama. You probably didn't notice as a kid, but Robotech was stitched together from 3 separate Japanese series, edited and dubbed for Western audiences. That fusion gave it a strange, beautiful chaos, a mix of love stories, politics, and genuine tragedy that Western TV had never seen before. Characters died, empires fell, entire civilizations were vaporized before the next commercial break for sugary cereal. For a generation raised on tidy endings, Robotech was different. It told you, sometimes heroes don't win, and sometimes peace costs everything. That truth hit too close to home for the censors. The show was eventually pulled from various local stations for being unsuitable for children, especially because of its portrayal of death and romantic relationships. Now you scroll through modern animation and realize how sanitized it's become. Conflict is fine, but grief, consequences, those are edited out. Back then, you learned that loss was part of life, even if it came with laser cannons and love triangles. Be honest, you still hum that theme song, don't you? Mighty Orbots. You probably forgot this one, and that's exactly what they wanted. Mighty Orbots was one of the most ambitious sci-fi cartoons of the 80s, but it disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. The animation was sleek, almost cinematic, fluid movements, electric color palettes, and a jazzy electronic soundtrack that pulsed through each battle. The story followed a team of robot heroes led by a human scientist named Rob Simmons, defending the galaxy from the evil Umbra. So why did it vanish? Simple. Copyright wars. Tonka Toys and World Events Productions sued because the show's robots looked too similar to their property, the GoBots. And because GoBots were being used to sell toys, the producers of Mighty Orbots were essentially accused of copying a competitor's product line. In other words, it wasn't the violence, it wasn't the story, it was the marketing machine that killed it. Networks yanked it from syndication to avoid lawsuits, and the entire show faded into obscurity. You couldn't even find VHS copies for decades. If you ever saw it, you remember the animation quality, cleaner than most American shows with Japanese artistry that rivaled early anime. And today, when everything old is being rebooted or reimagined, you wonder why Mighty Orbots never got a second chance. Maybe it's because some stories aren't meant to sell toys, they're meant to spark wonder. Have you ever noticed how some of the best things from your childhood disappeared for reasons that had nothing to do with you? Brave Star. Straightforward, unflinching, and completely unprecedented. Parents protested. Networks flinched, sponsors backed out. Eventually, Brave Star was pulled in several markets. But if you grew up with it, you remember how real it felt. It was a cartoon that respected kids enough to tell them the truth, that choices have weight, that power without wisdom is dangerous. Real Ghostbusters, censored episodes. Here's one that didn't get fully banned, but edited into oblivion. The Real Ghostbusters, a spin-off of the hit movie, was the supernatural show every kid wanted to watch. Proton packs, slime, ghosts, it had it all. But after a few seasons, network censors started slicing episodes apart. Some ghosts were too demonic. Some episodes leaned too hard into occult symbolism. There was one infamous storyline where a possessed doll kidnaps a child, a scene so intense that parents flooded ABC with complaints. After that, several episodes were recut or banned from syndication entirely. It's strange when you think about it. A show about ghost busting got censored for being too supernatural. The irony is almost poetic. You remember the thrill, don't you? The eerie hum of the proton streams, the green glow of Slimer floating through walls, the way Egon's voice could calm chaos in the middle of a paranormal storm. Watching that show made you feel like the world was bigger, stranger, and more alive than you'd ever imagined. Now those episodes are scrubbed clean. Modern audiences get polished animation and predictable plots, but none of the edge that made you feel something beyond comfort. So ask yourself, what made those moments magical? Was it the story, or the fact that it wasn't afraid to scare you a little? You see, these banned or buried shows weren't just cartoons. They were experiments in storytelling before the world got cautious. They taught courage, loss, risk, and wonder in ways no safe show can. The 1980s dared kids to imagine more, even when the world said, that's too much. But trust me, we're just getting started. Some of the next ones didn't just vanish, they were erased. You ever notice how the most creative shows always ended the same way? Not with a grand finale, but with silence. No announcement, no reruns, just gone. One day you woke up, flipped to your favorite channel, and it wasn't there. That quiet erasure happened to more than a few legendary 80s cartoons. Inhumanoids. You might have forgotten the name, but if you saw it once, you never forgot the feeling. Inhumanoids was like a nightmare you couldn't stop watching. a world where scientists fought giant, skeletal monsters born from the Earth's core. The animation was grotesque and mesmerizing. The monsters, Mettler, Tendril, Decompose, were designed to make your skin crawl. Their movements were slow and heavy, their roars deep enough to rattle your chest. Saturday mornings had never looked so terrifying. But here's the thing, it wasn't meant to scare you for fun. The show was about balance, about mankind's greed literally unearthing its own destruction. It warned kids about pollution, corruption, and power long before those topics became buzzwords. The monsters weren't villains, they were consequences. Of course, parents didn't see it that way. They saw skeletons, gore, and nightmare fuel. Complaints piled up, networks panicked, and the series was pulled from many markets before its first full season ended. It became one of those whispered about shows. Did I dream that? Kind of memories. But you didn't dream it. You just lived in a time when TV dared to give you stories that stuck under your skin. Now, everything that might cause a nightmare gets scrubbed clean before it reaches your screen. But isn't fear part of what made those mornings so unforgettable? Dungeons and Dragons. The final episode, Requiem, was written but never aired, a haunting, unfinished goodbye. It wasn't about magic at all. G.I. Joe, the movie, original ending. You remember the catchphrase, Yo Joe, the energy, the explosions, the sense that heroes never die. But behind the camouflage and laser beams, something darker almost made it to air. The 1987 G.I. Joe. The movie was supposed to kill off Duke, the show's beloved leader. In the original script, he's impaled during battle, whispers a farewell, and dies as the Joes win the war. The animators even completed the scene, but then something unexpected happened. Transformers. The movie hit theaters first, and Optimus Prime's death devastated kids nationwide. Parents were furious. Toy sales tanked. Hasbro panicked. They ordered G.I. Joe, the movie, to be rewritten before release. Instead of dying, Duke suddenly falls into a coma, and at the very end, off-screen, through a single line of dialogue, you hear someone say he woke up. Instant resurrection. That original version was effectively banned before it even aired. Censors didn't want to risk another public outcry. But the loss was bigger than one scene. It changed how children's shows handled mortality forever. From that point on, death became taboo in American animation. Probably didn't realize it at the time, but you grew up in the moment when TV forgot how to grieve. Doesn't it make you wonder what else got rewritten? What other truths were swapped for safety lines? Toxic Crusaders. Now, this one was wild. A mutant anti-hero cleaning up the world one radioactive mess at a time. Toxic Crusaders was the kid-friendly spin-off of The Toxic Avenger, a notoriously violent cult film made for adults. The show tried to mix comedy with environmental awareness. The colors were so bright they almost buzzed off the screen. Slime green, hazard yellow, and nuclear orange. Toxie, the deformed hero, taught you that pollution and greed were the real monsters. But beneath the jokes and slapstick, there was an uncomfortable message about what humans had done to their planet and themselves. It was too grotesque for parents, too moralizing for sponsors, and too strange for TV executives to understand. Within months, it was pulled from most stations, never even completing a second season. If you ever saw it, you remember the chaos. Mutants driving garbage trucks, villains dripping acid, the constant stench of radioactivity through your speakers. It felt rebellious, messy, alive. Today, environmental cartoons are polite. They lecture softly about recycling and global warming. But back then, Toxic Crusaders made pollution look monstrous because it was. Don't you miss when messages didn't need to be gentle to be true? The Snorks, banned episode. Even the innocent ones weren't safe. Remember the Snorks, those bubbly undersea creatures that felt like the aquatic cousins of the Smurfs? It was lighthearted, colorful, and harmless. But there's one episode that almost no one talks about, All's Whale That Ends Whale. In it, the Snorks discover a group of whales being hunted for profit by surface dwellers. The episode shows harpoons, nets, and terrified whales trying to flee. For a kid's show, it was uncomfortably realistic. Animal rights groups praised it, but broadcasters didn't. The episode aired once in limited regions and was quietly removed from reruns due to graphic content. That's right, saving whales was too graphic. Years later, when the show was released on home video, that episode was missing. You remember how the ocean looked in that cartoon, don't you? The shimmer of sunlight through blue water, the way bubbles danced around the characters' faces. It felt so real that you could almost taste the salt air. Maybe that's why it hit too hard, because it didn't feel like fiction. Would it still be too real today? Or have we just gotten too comfortable ignoring what hurts? Bionic 6. Now this one hurt to lose. Bionic 6 was the perfect fusion of family, technology, and heart. A blended family of heroes enhanced with bionic powers, fighting villains in a neon-soaked future. You could almost feel the hum of circuitry under their skin, the electric spark every time they powered up. The show celebrated diversity, love, and teamwork long before those were marketing buzzwords. But it also had a subtle darkness, a recurring theme about what it means to be human in a mechanized world. Certain countries banned or heavily edited it because of its body horror elements, implants, cybernetic surgery, and mutation. For others, it was too violent. But in truth, Bionic 6 was just too advanced. It talked about family unity in the face of transformation, about technology's price. Now you can't find it easily. It's been buried in legal limbo for decades, forgotten by the same companies that once used it to sell action figures. When you think about it, that's kind of poetic. The show about preserving humanity lost its own identity to corporate machinery. So tell me, do you remember feeling that spark in your chest when their theme song hit? That sense that anything mechanical could be magical? It's strange, isn't it? The shows that got banned were often the ones that believed in you the most. They trusted kids to handle big ideas, to wrestle with fear, grief, and consequence. Back then, imagination had edges. It cut you, but it also shaped you. And if you think these were intense, wait till you hear about the ones that were banned not for violence or fear, for truth. The next ones weren't dangerous because of monsters or magic. They were dangerous because they told you something real. You know, some shows didn't get banned because they scared kids. They got banned because they scared adults. Not with monsters, but with mirrors. Cartoons that held up the world and said, look at yourself, and that's what made them dangerous. Tiny Toon Adventures, Lifers, Jamie the Dasher, Elephant Issues. Now I know Tiny Toon Adventures was technically early 90s, but its DNA was pure 80s rebellion. The same animation, teams, the same chaotic humor, and the same guts to push limits. The episode Elephant Issues still echoes in controversy today. The segment One Beer featured Buster, Plucky, and Hampton finding a single bottle of beer, drinking it, and spiraling into a chaotic joyride that ends with their car plunging off a cliff. It was a satirical anti-drinking message, clear as day. Parents didn't see satire. They saw cartoon characters dying. The imagery was shocking. You remember it. The night sky turning red, the squeal of tires, the flash of headlights on a cliff's edge, and then silence. It was meant to be dark humor, but kids didn't laugh. Some cried. And that was it. The episode was banned from all reruns, labeled inappropriate. It's strange, though. The same generation that grew up watching Wile E. Coyote fall off cliffs couldn't handle Buster Bunny facing the consequences of one bad choice. Do you ever think the lesson might have worked better because it hurt to watch? COPS. Before there were live-action police dramas dominating prime time, there was COPS, Central Organization of Police Specialists. You can still hear that gritty voiceover. It's crime-fighting time. The show had style. The city of Empire was drawn like a futuristic New York. Neon reflections, grimy alleys, flashing lights cutting through fog. It was meant to glorify law enforcement in a heroic comic book way. But time changed how it was viewed. By the late 80s, the show started disappearing from certain networks, not because it was too violent, but because it was too real. Critics said it normalized militarized policing and racial stereotypes. Others claimed it glamorized force over justice. Years later, during re-airings, even the name became a problem. When real-world policing came under scrutiny, COPS was quietly retired from syndication altogether. It's almost ironic, what started as a symbol of justice became a casualty of changing times. But if you were a kid, you didn't see politics. You saw flashing sirens, high-tech gadgets, the hum of hover cars, the satisfaction of good beating evil. You believed in order, in right and wrong. Now, that simple clarity feels like something we're not allowed to feel anymore. Do you miss when cartoons let you root for heroes without needing a disclaimer? Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. Busted. This one hurts because the show itself was built on moral lessons. You remember Fat Albert, those scratchy animation. You remember Fat Albert, those scratchy animation lines, that warm, jazzy intro, and the sound of kids laughing in a junkyard. It was funny, real, and always ended with a message that stuck. But one episode crossed a line no one was ready for. Busted, the drug episode, was written to show kids the dangers of addiction. Fat Albert's friend Rudy tries drugs, thinking it'll make him cool, only to spiral into paranoia and collapse. The scene was raw, his voice breaking, his friends crying. It didn't hide the pain. When it aired, some parents called it too intense. Others called it necessary. But after controversy built, networks pulled it from syndication altogether. Decades later, you can barely find it anywhere. It's strange to think about. A cartoon trying to save kids from real-world harm got punished for being too real. Today's shows mention self-care, but never the abyss. Back then, Fat Albert walked right up to it and said, "Don't fall." Didn't that honesty make you trust it more? Captain Planet and the Planeteers, Population Bomb, and Deadly Ransom. If you grew up in the late 80s and early 90s, you remember that feeling. Captain Planet's glowing hair, the swirl of the elements coming together, and that voice shouting, "The power is yours." But not every episode survived. Population Bomb tackled overpopulation and family planning head-on. It was pulled from rotation in several countries, banned outright in others. The reason? It mentioned birth control and the consequences of unchecked population growth. Even the hint of that subject was considered taboo for children. Another episode had Deadly Ransom, showed eco-terrorists hijacking a plane with hostages, a storyline written years before 9/11 but banned afterward for sensitivity reasons. The world changed and suddenly the cartoon's villains felt too real. You can almost remember the tension of those episodes, the sound of machinery choking forests, the planet gasping for breath. Captain Planet didn't just fight pollution, he fought apathy. He made kids care. But caring has always been dangerous when it makes people uncomfortable. Now we have polished PSAs and soft documentaries, but no one tells you flat out, the world is dying unless you help. Captain Planet did, and that's why he disappeared. You ever wonder if we'd take the planet more seriously if they'd let him keep talking? Silverhawks. This one wasn't banned everywhere, but certain countries pulled it off the air for reasons that almost sound unbelievable today. Claims of occult imagery and cyber-demonic design. Today, claims of occult imagery and cyber-demonic design. Silverhawks were part metal, part human, heroes who flew through space fighting Monstar, a villain who transformed under a red moon into a chrome-plated demon. Transformation sequence, his eyes glowing, his body reshaping, looked too much like something from a heavy metal album cover. Some religious groups went after it, calling it satanic. Imagine that. Kids watching a cartoon about teamwork, courage, and sacrifice, and adults only seeing the devil in the details. But you remember how cool it was, don't you? The metallic shimmer of their wings, the guitar riffs that kicked in during flight, that perfect blend of rock and heroism. Silverhawks made you believe the future could be shiny and good, and yet that shine was what scared people most. Maybe that's the real story behind these bands. Every time something shined too brightly, someone decided to dim it. Denver, the Last Dinosaur. A talking dinosaur playing electric guitar? It sounds innocent enough, and it was, mostly. But one particular episode crossed into controversial territory when Denver accidentally consumes what's implied to be a psychedelic substance at a rock concert. The colors went wild, the music warped, and suddenly the fun-loving dinosaur was stumbling through what looked suspiciously like a hallucination. The episode was meant to parody 60s counterculture, but parents complained immediately. Networks edited it heavily for reruns and eventually pulled the episode entirely. Denver, the dino who sang about friendship and fun, had accidentally wandered into taboo territory. It's almost funny now. Cartoons trying to teach about culture and creativity ended up silenced for trying too hard to be honest. You remember that opening song though, right? Denver, the Last Dinosaur, He's My Friend, and a whole lot more. It wasn't just catchy, it was comforting. It reminded you that imagination didn't need permission. Now, every creative risk gets focus grouped to death before it reaches you. Maybe that's why nothing feels quite as alive anymore. So tell me, if you could bring one of them back, untouched, uncensored, raw, and real, which one would it be? If this took you back, if even one line, one image, or one sound made you feel that spark again, then you already know what to do. Hit like, drop a comment with the cartoon you'd risk bringing back, and subscribe for more memories that refuse to fade. Because nostalgia isn't about looking back, it's about remembering who you were before the world told you to grow up. If you enjoyed this and would love to see more of such nostalgic videos, click on the card showing on the screen.